I always like to call my kids every day for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 5 seconds, depending upon what mood they were in. It's that consistency of having that interaction, knowing that they're around constantly. You're sending signals to your children that you're thinking about them and you're making time and space for them. Kids remember that. When kids think back on that, they say, my dad used to call me every day.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is for entertainment and general information only. We're not your lawyer, doctor, therapist, or financial advisor, so don't take anything we say as gospel. Always get proper advice before making big life decisions, especially the ones involving money, kids, or your ex. The views expressed here are our own and don't reflect those of our employers, sponsors, or anyone else who still answers our calls. We do our best to keep things accurate, but we can't promise we won't get something wrong or offend your mate from work. Oh, and just like a dodgy protein bar, this podcast may contain traces of nuts. You've been warned.
G'day, welcome to the Steak Dinner podcast where middle-aged blokes get real talk, well done, raw stories, sharp tips and fresh takes on taking life's challenges head on and rebuilding stronger. So I'm Kieran, joined by Josh, the sensei of sayonara, the Sultan of Separation. JP, how are you, mate? What's on the docket for today?
A little bit confronted with that introduction, if I'm honest. But no,
There's
I'm
a few things.
I'm ready to go, mate. I got coffee, tea, water, even gin at the ready, depending upon where you want to take this conversation. So,
that's okay because it's a long weekend.
It's a long weekend
in Sydney.
How is your long weekend? What do you got planned?
Not much, mate. Probably head out to the Bulldogs game. Actually, the Bulldogs are playing Parramatta. The Battle of the West, or there is the Penrith one as well. So that'll be good. Going out for a family day out there. So that should be fun. What about you, mate?
Are you going to do full disclosure on our NRL team preferences?
Well, fine. Yeah. I'm 100% Bulldogs and you're 100% Para.
100%. Yeah. Which is, I know you know this probably as well as I do. Supporting Parramatta is an emotional roller coaster. It's a challenge. It takes a lot of resilience and integrity to follow the Eels, let me tell you that. But
you guys don't rest even when you're 40 points up because you know you can lose from there.
That's true. So weekend, not much planned?
No. It's all pretty good. I'm going to a 50th tonight just to catch up with some lads.
Mm-hmm.
An old schoolmate. What are you up to?
I have got a party tomorrow night. The theme is Dancing Queen. I'm not really a dress up kind of guy. I don't like it, to be honest. But you love the dress up. I think I've seen a few of your outfits. You're right on that, aren't you?
I love how you say
be honest.
You're right into dress up. My thing would be at least everyone.
No, I didn't say cross dressing. I didn't say cross dressing. I said dressing up.
Well, I did go as Freddie Mercury once, which is basically my John McClane outfit, but, basically the same thing. What do we got on today on the docket, JP?
Well, looking forward to this one, mate. Here's a stat I want to throw at you. 80% of separated men end up leaving the family home. So that's 4 out of 5 guys. So this podcast is really about, how do we make that new chapter work for our listeners? So we'll look at a few different aspects of that. We're going to look at how to set up kid-friendly spaces, how to beat loneliness when the kids aren't around, how to communicate effectively with your ex, and ultimately how to rebuild and thrive from that situation. Okay. So there is hope, KM, a lot of hope being there. Got that T-shirt, but for those listeners that are feeling a little bit in the dumps where this is raw and this is their world at the moment, there is a way out and there is a lot of positive to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, there's lights at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, you're one of the perfect examples, and that's really why, we started this pod, to make sure that other blokes know that you're not alone and that there's a way out. So that's good. We'll talk about that. But anyway, for some banter, other than the long weekend, I guess we had State of Origin this week. Or last week. So
did you watch the whole game?
Yeah, that was good. It's a great game.
Did you enjoy it? I'll be honest with you. It was I don't know, something seemed off, and I don't know if there's a correlation between the Eels going so poorly this year and my interest in NRL in general. But I did watch the first half. For me, there seemed to be something missing than previous Origins, but maybe that was probably a bit of misplaced sentiment there.
Well, we had your halfback in there. We had Moses. He played well.
And then had Cleary. He was good. His kicking game was off.
Well, that was probably last week's, and I think this morning's is Elon and Donald Trump are maybe having a bit of a breakup separation. So that might be another one for next week's pod. But I noticed Tesla shares are down 14%.
Yes,
immediately. Wow.
So you know what that means for me, KM. I did not need a cup of coffee to get out of bed this morning. That news was horrific for me this morning.
How about we talk about this is really about the early separation, right? If you want to talk to us about what are the challenges from an early separation and maybe a bit about your experience, that'd be great for everyone, all the listeners. And don't let me forget about all the listeners that have been pinging in little comments and things that I've got to share with you and probably everyone on the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Look, for me, I've explained in previous episodes, I separated in 2009 around May. So that 6 months from May to November when I actually left, that was a really tough time for me. I felt like a bit of a vagabond there. I had moved 4 times in 6 months and was going through a very, very unsettled period. I moved out of the family home and my first stop was in a caravan in a rural farm, and that was for about 4 to 6 weeks. I did that, and that was in the middle of winter, so that was tough for me. I think that was the closest I've felt to homelessness, because being in that caravan felt like I was sleeping outside.
Yeah.
May as well have been. There was no insulation, and my most vivid memory of that time was I just could not get enough blankets on me to feel warm. When I would put my head on the pillow, anywhere I would touch on that pillow where my head wasn't felt like a blanket of ice. So that was my memory of the caravan. And then from there, I was very fortunate. I had a close family member who was also divorced, and he took me in with a lot of grace, and I stayed there for about 12 weeks. That was a real critical support for me during that time, because I got to be in a home, in a family environment. It allowed me a place for my children to visit as well, which was really helpful. And it was really the precipice for me to rebuild and get myself to where I needed to be. But after the 12 weeks, I think that had run its course. That was really just a bit of a halfway house for me. And then living in a regional area, I was living on the Central Coast at the time. My background is really in finance. So for me to be able to get the opportunities to go back and reestablish a career, I had to move back to Sydney. So from there, I found myself in a little studio apartment at Parramatta, which was, I think I've discussed this in a previous episode. It was tiny. I could open up the refrigerator from my bed, and there wasn't a lot of room to be had. Stayed there for about, I think another 6 months maybe. And then from there, I moved into another apartment. And that was a 2-bedroom apartment. So once I got into that 2-bedroom apartment, that really allowed me to settle down nicely, take out a long-term lease, and start getting in some structure into it.
And so how far away were you from your kids when you were at Parramatta and the second?
Yeah, look, it wasn't ideal, because my children, and really it would go against the advice that I would give most guys, which would be to, keep yourself close to the kids. I understand, and I know this from myself, it's not always possible, because when you're trying to earn an income,
Yeah.
Sometimes it is what it is. I didn't have the opportunities for my work living locally, so I had to relocate, and that did create some issues around distance, but it is what it was, and I just had to make the most of that situation.
Yeah. But your advice really is you'd want to live close to your kids. So if possible, right? So
Absolutely. I would definitely recommend if you've just separated and you're looking at relocating, either be close to where your kids live or close to schools, because you do really want to have that proximity to your children. It's going to be very helpful for you, particularly when you're doing custody arrangements, how often your children visit. They're going to look at proximity. And particularly if you do go to court, they do look at the best interests of the children. So if the commute is a long commute, that's not going to play well for you in terms of getting the frequency of contact that you might otherwise like.
yep. And so what was the two better like? So presumably that's where you started to see them a bit more, or?
What I will say is there's a few things that guys need to consider when they start to journey. And the first thing is they need to get their mindset right before they get their logistics right. They need to understand that when you move out of your family home, you are going to go into an uncomfortable situation. You are going to go into a space that is going to be less than what you were living in. And you need to accept that with grace. But you also need to understand that it's a temporary setback and there is light at the end of the tunnel. But the quicker that you understand that there is going to be a change in your assets, there's going to be a change in your living circumstances, that's going to make it easier for you to process and move on from that. And I would also say for our listeners, you really need to reassess where your values are. Because as we are coming up in that first half of our life, we're building our family, we're building our asset base, and we put a lot of worth and value into those things, those physical assets. We kind of judge ourselves by the things that we see around us, the nice house, the nice car, the nice school, and all of the nice trimmings. And when you separate and you leave the home, you're going to leave all that behind you, at least temporarily. So my suggestion would be start to reassess what you value and understand that your value is not tied to your assets. Your value is tied to the relationships that you have with the people around you, right? Particularly with your children, with your family, with your friends, and ultimately your health as well. These are all very important things. Everything else is just trimmings around the side. But these are the things that are important. And if you focus on that, if you focus and move away from things and redirect your focus back to good mental health, good relationships with your children, and you place that high on your values, then you're going to feel like a winner, because you don't need money to win in relationships. You just need to be there. You need to turn up. You need to put in the time. And refocus what's important in your life.
Yeah, well, the kids would need that too, right? They need to see that you're in a good headspace, that you're calm as well. Yeah, you've got your stuff together. It may not be great, like you say, it's the 2-bedroom unit. How do you compare that to your 5-bedroom house, which is where they live, with a pool and blah, blah, blah. But like you said, nearly every week you say that you've got to treat it not in a hierarchical way that shows that you're living what you're preaching. So you've got to be able to put those kids higher up the scale. All the other things don't matter, right? So
Kieran, it only matters to the mums and dads. It doesn't matter to the kids. And it's our pride and it's our ego that want to believe that that's what you're doing and where you're directing your attention and where you're spending your time, that the kids have so much value for that. but ultimately they don't. If you look at children, if you look at yourself, and if you look at what was really important to you when you were growing up and as an adult reflecting on that experience, no one talks about the things. They talk about the time and they talk about the experience and they talk about the attention. And that doesn't cost anything. But so, you know, again, you need to put your pride and you need to put your ego to the side and understand that what's really important here, if you want to have a healthy relationship with your children, is just showing up consistently, putting in the effort, being present, really present when they're around, because kids know when you're present, and they know when you're just sort of hanging around the fringes and you're sort of up, but you're not really there.
Yeah.
I'm
You got
talking
your phone in your hand.
You got your phone in your hand. The reality is you're not going to see your kids as much. No. That's the reality. So fathers need to understand it's a quality, not a quantity game. And consistency. Yep. It's not about spending days and weeks together. It's about when you interact with your children, even if it's for a lunch, are you there with your kids? Are you interested? Are you engaged? Kids will remember that. So you don't need to think that because I'm only seeing them 30% of the time, that's going to derail my relationship with my children. I've seen many a father that have their kids full time and they hardly talk to their kids.
Yeah, no, 100%. If you've got access to them all the time, it's something you probably don't prioritize. You sometimes prioritize yourself.
Kieran, how often do you swim in your pool?
My pool?
Yeah.
Basically never.
Correct. Neither do I, right? Why is that?
Yeah.
Because it's there all the time. Right?
That's right.
So we tend to kind of, when something's there, we take things for granted. And it's not just things. I know I was making a comparison there, but that mindset can overflow into people as well.
Yeah. I was just thinking some of the best times, the things that I remember about my father is dead, but one of them, just things that pop into your mind. Like you say, it's just, changing the oil on the cars and, doing things on the cars together, which was just us two working on it. Those sort of things are the things you are doing fully and fully aware that costs nothing and it was just time. So
absolutely. And things like, teaching your kids how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
These are the types of memories that are baked into kids. So that, again, kids don't say, he saw me 70% of the time.
No.
These are adult mindsets. These are not the way kids are all about making sure you're present and was he engaged with me and what did I learn from that? What experiences did he help me to give and to grow?
Yeah, they want to know that you're consistently there, right?
Consistently there.
Yeah.
Consistency flows over into, say, when the kids are not around. Okay. How often are you engaging the children when they're not around? Again, it's about quality of interactions and regularity of interactions. I always like to call my kids every day, for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 5 seconds, depending upon what mood they were in.
Yep.
But it's that consistency of having that interaction, knowing that they're around constantly. And it's also signaling to your children, when you call your kids every day or whatever you think is the right amount of time, you're sending signals to your children that you're thinking about them and you're making time and space for them. Kids remember that. Kids don't remember if you're calling up your kids won't reflect on that and go, we spoke for 30 minutes every time no. When kids think back on that, they say, my dad used to call me every day. Every day he was around. So just things like that. It's not a science, but make the kids front of mind and make those regular interactions and use the tools. We've got some great tools. So if you haven't got the physical space, occupy that with virtual space. Get on FaceTime with the kids. find ways to interact with them when they're not physically present, to show that engagement, and find ways to engage with your kids where they're not physically present.
Actually, so if they were young, how did you communicate with your kids when they were young? Did they have their own phones?
No, it was
No.
a long time ago, Kieran. I think I was lucky
Yeah.
to have a phone at that
Yeah.
stage. They did have a phone. They had a phone. I think probably an old phone from their mother, and then they would use that to call. There's no real video chatting back then. I think Skype was still around.
Okay, yeah.
But it was in its infancies and things like that. But it was really just about the phone calls, and it's great to have the video, but it's not essential to communicate with your kids. A phone is good enough. So any sort of phone doesn't have to be fancy.
So okay, so you moved into the 2-bedroom. So they come over every second weekend or something, and how'd you squeeze them all in and make it your home?
Yeah, now we're sort of getting into the logistics side of things. Look, I think for most of the gents in our audience, if you've got more than one kid, you're going to find yourself probably in a more confined space, if I can put it that way. So, consider things, be smart about it. Try and give your kids a space. I opted for bunks because that was just practical. I had 2 kids. I needed to save as much space as possible. But give your kids a space. It doesn't have to be fancy, but certainly give them a space that they can call their own, and let them be a part of building that space. Let them pick out, for example, their own linen. If you want to paint a wall, let them help choose a color. Let them take over the fridge. Make sure you got plenty of photos around the place of you and the kids, and try to set up an environment that makes them feel when they're coming over to your place, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to feel like they're going to a second home.
Yeah, okay. And at home, you've got things like your rituals, right? You've got the way that you do things at home, and now you've got ways you do things at the new house, which it might be spaghetti bolognese every Wednesday night, or this sort of thing, right? Or movie night, or whatever.
Yeah, it's perfect. And these are all rituals and routines, and kids love rituals and they love routine, because rituals and routine make kids feel comfortable. Routine makes them feel safe. So does discipline. But we'll talk about that soon, about the discipline side of things, because that's an interesting topic. But certainly create as many rituals as you can. They don't have to be high cost.
No.
Okay. Normally you're going to be pretty busted at this point. I would assume most people are coming out of these relationships. So do look for things like, to your point, movie night. If you've got a streaming service, you got a Netflix night. You got pancakes in the morning. You got the spaghetti bolognese. Let the kids come in and help make the spaghetti bolognese and make the garlic bread, or whatever the case may be. Make it a ritual that you do together, and a bit of an activity that you do together, and try to find little, the reading of stories before you go to bed. I'm going to read you a book before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Have as many of those as you possibly can.
I guess for you, your kids were young at the time, right? When it was all first happening. There's all different, blokes are getting separated at all different ages. There's, when the kids are older, after they've all left the home, under, over 18, or, some are, and, teenagers and things like that. Any other tips for those sort of guys?
Look, I think adult separation where the children are adults, I would suggest, would be still extremely difficult in its own way. Separation involving moving away from children and sort of changing that stable environment that you once had is going to be difficult. I think it's probably more challenging for younger children, because when your kids are old enough, it's really, and particularly adults, it becomes their choice how they want to see you. You don't have to worry about, getting involved with courts and things like that. Once they're 18, kids can kind of do whatever they want. They're probably a bit older to sort of process what's happening and understand. Not to say it's not challenged and it hasn't got its own difficulties and things like that. Absolutely it does. And I'm not trying to discount that. I'm just saying that the problems are different, and the logistics of younger children become a lot harder and generally can become a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Over 16, kids get to choose, do they? Or the courts will take it into account, I assume.
It's more they'll take into account. But I did find naturally, and I'm only talking from my own experience, once my kids turned around, it kind of moved to a more informal arrangement, because and I think you've got to be open to that and not take it personally, because when my kids turned 16 and they're getting on with their lives and they're getting jobs and they've got girlfriends and boyfriends and they've got studies and they're coming into their HSC and they just don't have the time for you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult when you're first confronted with that. You really personalize that. You take it personally. You think, well, they don't want me.
Yeah.
And it's not that
they actually don't want either parent.
They don't want either
I could
parent.
say that from experience, yeah.
I don't even think that it's that they don't want you. It's that
no. They're just busy.
They've got other they're busy. They've got other priorities. Yeah. But I think as adults, and again, it comes back to pride, KM. Our pride tells us, I know with my son, God love him. That was felt like it was an overnight shift. One time him and I were, doing the city to surf together, going to the gym together. And then just one day he wanted his friends, and that's absolutely fine. I wanted the exact same thing for myself when he was his age.
It's age appropriate. It's age appropriate, right?
But
you become ego, like you develop your ego at that point. You develop yourself. You develop your own person. So it all makes complete sense. But I really take out of what you're saying that when you are separated as well and you're only seeing them 2 days out, maybe with you 2 days every fortnight, then and you want to see them in those 2 days, and they may need to be studying for their exams, or they may need to go to birthday parties wherever they are, and you're a long distance away, then that also is hard. You don't want to be taking that personally. It's not that they don't want to be with you as such, but it's just a stage of life for them, for the kids.
For them. And you just hit the nail on the head. It's what they need. So as a parent, it's like, do you want a weekend that satisfies your needs or their needs?
Josh, I was thinking then, how did you keep all of this going where you got to see the kids, but you were, intermittently living in a caravan, living somewhere else, in a studio and then to your 2-bedroom unit? Because I had a stat before that, after 12 months you felt settled, but only one in four blokes feels reasonably settled after a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Look, for me, I had to accept that this was a situation I was in, and it wasn't an ideal environment, certainly.
Yeah.
But I had to make the most of the situation that I was in. I understood that it was a temporary measure and I wasn't going to let it certainly define me. And I knew that ultimately there would be a light at the end of the tunnel, which there was after about 12 months. But you just need to buckle down and understand that this is going to be your life for a short term. And those logistics don't hit your children as hard as they hit you. So I think that's, again, something you have to be mindful of. And even though it was not the ideal situation, I tried to make the most of that. So for me, I was fortunate enough. I had very close family, and I would navigate through my siblings and my parents, and we would spend, every couple of weeks, I would sort of be at my sister's place or my mum's place or my brother's place. And I just kind of rotate through like that. Again, wasn't the best. However, there was an upside to that. They had cousins So during that time, they use that as a way for them to build up their relationships with their cousins.
Yeah.
And so you have to find the positives in these situations, right? And not focus on the negatives. And when I think of it today, I was out to dinner the other week. All the nephews and nieces were there. They are so close, KM.
Yeah.
So close. And I know part of that was they spent so much time together as kids. So that was one of the positives that came out of that situation. So you just have to find the little lights here and there whilst you're going through that temporarily unsettling period.
Yeah. Mate,
Yeah.
well, the couple that I reckon are great there, that say you sort of built emotional anchors, so to speak, you know, with the family, like your family. Yeah,
Yes.
I like putting the photos up in the new place. So photos of you, just you and the kids, like that's
Yes.
good. Those sort of things, and I'm sure maybe from a female perspective, they could walk into a place and put things on the wall. You know, it's very innate.
Yep.
That, look, those sort of things, and getting the kids to be involved. I think all those are in
Yep.
making that place a home. I think that's great. But
Yes.
I guess then you've got them for the weekend or wherever, however long you've agreed with your partner or ex-spouse. And now it's a new thing, right? Because you have that moment of joy that you got your kids, and then you got to drop them off again. So how do you rewire your headspace there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I'd say most men that are separated would absolutely understand this when you have that contact and then you drop them off. So you get the experience of a family, but it's such a small fragmented time. It's like you get to experience being a family, but for such a short period of time, and then it's removed from you.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it. So a couple of things I would recommend, because I've been down that hole. It's a very emotional time, because when you drop off your kids, it's so silent and it just feels so lonely. It's just you again. And it's such a contrast from, having the kids around and all the noise and excitement and even the yelling and all the disciplining and all that kind of stuff. So my recommendation in that instance would be have a plan of attack for when you drop off your kids.
Okay.
Have something at the ready to go to, an activity, sports, gym, coffee with your mate, go visit your family, because what you don't want to do is to return back to your little studio, sit on the lounge and cry, because you're really sort of putting yourself into a negative environment and a very lonely environment. And I don't think, from my perspective and from my own experience, it's very healthy to do that. So it's very transitory, KM. So when you're in that transition phase, look for something positive that you can go to that's going to be a physical and a mental distraction. Yep. And make sure that you're around positive people. Don't go set yourself up to go have coffee with somebody that's going to spend the whole time just absolutely piling on your ex-wife, for example.
Yeah.
You don't want to be around those people. Be around positive people that are going to help you to sort of anchor to rebuilding your life and getting your life back on track in a very positive way. Try and stay away from the bad habits. Don't drop off your kids and go to the bar and drink yourself into oblivion. That's not really going to help anything. I mean, for me, sometimes it would be going to the gym. Sometimes I would have a date. I'd plan a date after I dropped off the kids. It was just something fun, something distracting to look forward to after the drop off. And you will feel, just on that note, you will feel like you're almost living a double life.
Yeah.
during this time as a dad, because it's like you're a bachelor for 70% of the time or 50%, whatever that, and then you're a dad. So I would suggest that when you have the kids, be switched on with the kids. Don't make your apartment or your home into a bachelor pad. It's not. It's a family home.
Yep.
You're a dad, make it into a family home because that's what your kids need.
Yep.
So make sure. And when I say family home, I'm not talking about a cardboard cutout of what they have with their mum either. Make it your home, your environment. Don't try to duplicate what they've got or replicate what they've got. Just put your own touches on it. Make it dad's home. They got mum's home, you got dad's home. Yep. So do that. Make sure you've got stuff at the ready, and just understand it reminds me of that show Severance. Have you seen that show Severance on
Apple
TV?
I haven't watched it. No.
I won't go into the explanations, but it's essentially this guy's got this compartmentalized brain. When he goes to work, he goes up the elevator, and as he's going up the elevator, his work brain switches on.
Yep.
And then when he goes down the elevator, his personal brain switches on. And the personal brain doesn't know what the work brain is doing, and vice versa.
Right.
So hence the title Severance. It's compartmentalized.
Yep. And that's how you've got to approach it.
You've got to approach it in a compartmentalized way. How do you do that? The first thing I would suggest, and my biggest piece of advice, when you separate, when you move out of home, understand that relationship has moved from personal relationship to a business relationship. Yeah. And I love the work analogies.
Yeah,
KM.
I do. But it makes sense. Maybe because
I love my work analogies because let me ask you this. Have you ever responded emotionally at work? Oh, I know I have. Right?
Yeah.
I've let my emotions get the better of me. And I think if you've been in the workforce for, 20, 30 years, I'm sure you can point to a situation where your emotions have run wild. Right.
Sure.
And my next question would be, how did that work out for you? Right.
Yeah.
So
not well.
Bringing emotions into this is never going to help you. Change your focus. This relationship is now a business relationship.
Okay.
When you do that, it will create in your mind, an arm's length between you and your ex. Yep. And you will start seeing these issues not as personal attacks, but business problems that need to be solved.
That's good.
Why that's important is because you will adopt a very different mentality to approaching that problem. You're going to be a lot smarter. You're going to be calmer. They just won't be emotionally driven decisions, right? Yep. You're going to be very pragmatic. Pragmatic is the word I'm looking for. This is what you need during this time. You need pragmatism. Again, that's a mental shift that guys need to come to terms with.
Yeah. So when you start that off, I'm assuming, so you've rewired your head, and presumably we should also say, look, you get professional help if you need it. Yeah. And I think you've spoken about that previously, that some work organizations give counseling and free counseling, and you get some counseling elsewhere. So, still keep that option if you need it. But so what you're really getting to here is from the communications going forward with your ex-spouse, then and you're in a business mode, I guess, or thinking about it pragmatically. How do you do that? Because you're used to dealing with your spouse in verbally, phone calls, text messages, WhatsApp messages, via the kids. That's just the normal calendars, all sorts of things in terms of communication. So how did you do it? What was your experience, and what were some of the ways that people can do it? Or your tips?
Well, for me, I needed to understand that, again, this is a business relationship. How do people communicate in business? Generally more formally and in writing.
Yep.
Yeah. I wasn't having all of these informal chit-chats anymore. That's out the door, KM.
Yep.
That's out the door. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just what you're trying to do is you are trying to detach yourself from a type of relationship that you had, and you're creating boundaries. You're creating boundaries with that person. So I would suggest that when you separate, you move your communications down more formalized, transparent channels.
Yep.
There's apps that you can use that are co-parenting apps. One is, Our Family Wizard is an example. I'm not going to run off the list, but if you go to the App Store, you can just look up co-parenting apps and you'll see a whole suite of apps. Do the research yourself. They've all got different features, with shared calendars. You got a formal communication channel. It gets monitored for language and things like that. So
Okay. Wow.
all those
That's
types
good.
of things, right? So you've got
Yeah.
apps that have got sort of governance in them. These ones, a lot of these ones, it makes it very easy if you're going to, if you're going through a family court dispute and things like that. You want to keep all of your communications through those centralized channels that have got some governance, and they're set up for the task, right?
Okay.
There might be a small subscription fee to these things, but I think certainly for the heartache that'll probably help you with, it's definitely worth the investment.
Yep.
So keeping the communication channels open, but keeping them fairly formal is a good idea. Keep it super respectful. If you're going to text and it's an emotional text, then just put down your phone and walk away.
Yeah.
Really, those texts are not going to get you anywhere other than in an affidavit at a family court where they'll be submitted as evidence against you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
course.
the reality. They will subpoena the texts where you're bad mouthing your ex, and you're going to hear them being played back in court. So again, don't say anything over a text you wouldn't want to hear about yourself in a courtroom.
And
Would be my suggestion.
don't say it and don't put it in writing, right? So,
And don't put it in
you've
writing.
said before, don't badmouth the ex. It doesn't really
Don't
get you
badmouth, but
to
also
the kids. Yeah.
exactly. But also understand it's like work, Kieran. In the workplace, if you and I are having a conversation, even informally, and I'm not saying cut out the informal conversation, because if you can have a great relationship, that's the best for the kids.
Yeah.
That is the best for the kids. I'm just talking about the statistics and the realities of the situation. That situation is more unlikely than likely. You need to accept that.
And that would actually happen a lot when you're in the separation phase rather than the fully settled divorce. Everything's fine. Everyone's found new partners. They're both living their best life. Then you can look back on that, what the great things you got out of that relationship. But that separation period is difficult on both parties, right? And so, yeah, I totally get that.
It is certainly difficult for both parties. What I do see a lot of, and this is where I think men become unstuck. I'm sure women do, and I'm not discounting a woman's or the mother situation. I'm talking about men because they're 80% of the people that leave these situations. And what generally seems to happen is that everyone starts with good intentions. Everybody says, you know what, we're going to be different. We got kids. For the kids, we're going to be different. It's going to be calm. And it's like, yeah, but that's great. I understand that. But you're basing that whole premise on something you don't know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
Right? When you start to understand what's involved in getting divorced and how uncomfortable these topics are, and how when you dig deep, you actually want for different things and you have competing objectives, that's when the niceties are going to start to wear off.
Yeah.
And that's
the
when
the minutiae of holidays, of Christmas days, of Boxing Days, of Mother's Day, Father's Day, these sort of things are the minutiae of small things of what's in the house, what's not, what does one person get? What does the other person get? Yeah, you're
Well,
competing for different things there,
you're
aren't you?
you're talking about division of assets. That's one aspect of it. You
Yeah.
know, the parenting plan, just the arrangements with the kids, what that looks
Mm.
like. My parenting plan is 11 pages long.
Yeah, right.
Okay, 11 pages, and it's not in 40 font, right? We're talking 10 or 12 decent pages of
Yeah.
agreed conditions, and that's just with the
Approved by
parents.
the court, presumably, Josh, was it?
Approved by the court.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get our listeners to understand is there is a lot to consider.
Mm.
So protect yourself. Keeping it informal is okay, but just like in a work environment, I go back to the point. If you and I were having a discussion and agreed informally on how we were going to move forward on a particular issue, that's fantastic. That's the best way to do it. But what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to send you an email. Hey, KM, great chatting with you, mate. Just want to reiterate, we agreed on this and this is how we're going to move forward. Okay, now I've got it in writing. You need to adopt the same approach with your ex. If you have an informal agreement, make sure it's recorded somewhere in the co-parenting app or whatever it is. But also understand that even if you've got all that in place, without a parenting agreement, you got nothing.
I've got a story for you. I'll say it as a hypothetical, Josh. But
Which means we know
everybody for the list. Everybody for the listeners, maybe consider this one. Imagine you've gone to a barbecue where your ex is also there with her partner, and you're with your new partner, and you've got a child with your ex, and everyone's trying to be cordial, obviously, and one of them and the ex-wife might say, or ex-partner says, I'd really like to, we'd really love to move to Queensland because that'd be a great way to do it. And there's other people around, around the barbecue. And, we'd love to go up there because, there's so many opportunities in Queensland, so much cheaper, do these sort of things. And you might say in a nice, easy way, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, we'd love to make that move up there as well. And then within, hypothetically, 2 weeks, they're already up there with your child. Because there were witnesses to said conversation. That there was an agreement that it was appropriate to move to Queensland from New South Wales. And for the listeners, that's 1,000 kilometres away. And then trying to get a court enforcement on that, around that process to bring your child back, that is, or could be, hypothetically, absolutely gut-wrenching. So, and part of these reasons of why we have this podcast and why we started it is to share tips and hints and know that you're not alone out there. Yeah, but to your point, you've absolutely nailed it. In some ways where you try to be really good, you actually have to watch what you say in a business-like format. If you make a verbal agreement, it is legal. So, or could be legal, I should say. So, be careful.
Be careful out there. And that's why I think where men go wrong is because they do, and the intentions are good.
No, the intentions was absolutely
intentions
good.
Are fantastic. They're not. They just they want the they want the best outcome for their children. Absolutely get that. The heart is in the right place, but the mind is in the wrong place. Right. So, and you're actually not. Even though you've got the intentions of helping your kids, that example going up to Queensland, they will see their dad once every 3 months. Is that in the best interest of the kids? No, it's not. No. So you're serving one person's interests, one parent's interests, and
you're not serving the kids' interests there, Josh. I don't think. The kids' interests are served best where they have involvement from both parents, right?
Not just involvement, it's the relationship, KM.
Yeah. The relationship. Good point.
For a relationship to thrive, it needs time. It needs regularity. It needs, some level of close contact. You are not going to build a good relationship with your children, seeing them 3-4 times a year. It's just not going to be in the best interests of the children. And dads are just as important as mums.
Yeah.
Right? We can't
100%.
discount the importance of dads. If you got an absent father, do not think that as a mother, you can play both those roles. Just like if a dad's got sole custody, as much as you might be maternal, you're not a mum to the kids. They have a mum. Mums bring something different, unique, and special to the table. So do dads. We've all got our role to play, and don't think that you can just go off and have the kids with one parent and that's not going to hurt those kids. Yeah. It is absolutely going to hurt those kids, which means that you need to put your pride and ego to the side. This is the other compartmentalization I think that needs to happen. You need to understand, and we've touched on this before, you've got the relationship and you have the family aspects of your home. When one goes, the other can still thrive. You don't have to let that relationship or the demise of that relationship bleed into your parenting. For that to happen, you need to show restraint, discipline. You need to put your pride in check. Yep. All those things need to happen if you're going to have a positive relationship with your kids.
Yeah, so pause before replying, stay calm,
take
breaks from it.
Take
and have it written, maybe stick to the facts, the dates, the times, the pickups, the locations, who's doing what. Yeah, so clear communication to protect the kids and reduce the drama, right?
100%. And remember as well, if you're at this juncture, if you're listening to this, if you haven't moved out already, just know that if you don't have something locked down through family court, you're putting yourself in a very high-risk situation because you have got no leverage until that happens. And the police will not help you in this without a court order, without a court-approved parenting plan in place, either interim or final orders. They just will not get involved, KM. They can't get involved. I think the strongest point is get something formal, right, through the courts before you leave. Most blokes don't.
Courts, all the way through the courts, not just...
Well, interim order hearings can be quite, depending upon where things are at, but you can get those within 6 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
What I would first suggest is that if you haven't left, go speak to your lawyer. Yeah, that's probably the best advice.
Yeah, great.
Speak to your lawyer, explain the situation, explain your concerns, and they will guide you in terms of what would be best practice for your situation so that you don't railroad yourself. Because once you're out of that home without that order, you are in big trouble. Okay? And you're not going to realize you're in big trouble until you start to say, I want to see the kids. And then, they say, well, no, you can't have the kids tonight. And then you'll say, yeah, but I'm the dad, of course I can see the kid. And then you'll ring up your local police station and say, hey, I want to see my kids and I'm the dad and she's not letting me see the kids and that was my house. And they'll say, have you got a parenting plan through the court? And you'll say, no. They'll go, I can't really help you out here. And that's when that's when you click. You actually don't have a right to see your kids when you leave. Wow. That is the reality.
Not legally.
Not legally.
Yeah. Or enforceable. Yeah. Okay.
Not exactly. So
like this has been a heavy, like the heavy episode. And I know we've tried to break them up, everyone, like try to break them up between heavy and light, heavy and light, heavy and light. Like just because there are things here that we really want to get out. And I've been hoping that Josh is able to share some of what he's gone through and I'm learning a lot as well. So what's the big message here then, JP?
The big message from me is you're going to go, this is a tough time, but don't let it define you. Understand it's not forever. Your life is not coming to an end, right? It's a tough spot to be in because you're going to be impacted in several areas. So this is going to be a very high stress time for you financially, physically, emotionally. It could bleed into your work. I had all of those things taken off me in one foul swoop. I made my way back. I'm healthier than ever. I'm doing better than ever in all those stages, right? In all those places, I'm ahead of the game. So
you've got a great relationship with your kids.
I've got a great relationship with kids, with my wife.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable. I'm in a comfortable home. The other thing I'd say, KM, just to give our listeners a bit of hope, you feel like it is a ground zero, and we kind of touched on this. It does feel like ground zero, but you know what you bring to the table now that you didn't have 20 years ago? You've got wisdom, you've got experience, you've got skills. So don't think that because it took you 20 years to get to that point, it's going to take you another 20.
Good point.
Yeah,
I like
because
it.
I knew how to get back there. So I could do it a lot faster because I had all those skills and experiences that allowed me to short circuit all of those traditional things that I needed to do as a novice. Yeah.
But,
So
but
you could,
I'll also say, Josh, every dad's journey is unique. Like the kids' ages are different going through this. And even if you're just separating and you don't have kids, you know, it's a similar thing. Every journey is different in that separation. But if you do have kids, your big thing that I always take out of it is that you're focused on the kids. And I'm sure everyone is, that's probably natural for the fathers. And we're obviously speaking to fathers here, but mothers would be thinking the same thing. You're also doing your progress, like doing something rather than doing the perfect thing straight away. Like go to the gym, start, go for your walk, go for your coffee, do all those things. Yeah, keep the small steps.
what's that AM that, you know, perfection is the enemy of good. And it is that small steps. Just, are you making progress? Are you better this week than last week? That's what incremental. And if that's the case, you are heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
And
so
that will
one actionable step every week. I love that one of contacting the kids every day. But yeah, keep that going. But do your things in writing. What was that app again?
Our Family Wizard.
Okay.
And again, this is not a recommendation.
No.
Not
But I've never heard of it. So that's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's just one we pulled out of the bag.
Okay.
Have a look at those co-parenting apps. Again, just look at one small step. You know, this week could be, I'm going to move my communications to a co-parenting app. I'm going to create a new ritual with the kids for when they come over, whether it be spaghetti night or movie night, whatever, we're going to make it fun. So just think about stuff like that and look after your health. Eat well, exercise, talk to good people, not just any people. Talk to good people, family, friends that are in your corner, people that have got your back. Again, we've mentioned this before. It's not a numbers game. Just speak to good people. Yeah. Even if it's one good person, just keep bashing their ears and that'll help you along. So this has been good. I know these are tough topics and they can be very emotional topics, but I hope that this was able to help some of our listeners that may be going through this situation at the moment where they're feeling a little bit raw, they're feeling a little bit lost, they're looking for a bit of a game plan, some direction. I hope this episode does support them on their journey. If it does, all I would ask kindly is that you follow us through the socials, through Spotify, through YouTube. We've even got a TikTok channel up there. And we love to hear the comments. We love engaging with our audience as well. All this stuff helps. It helps the algorithm. It helps to get our message out there to more people. The more this message goes out, the more people inevitably we're hoping to help here. So just one is enough for us, but if we can spread that message far and wide and help as many people as we can,
I just want to say, it's been heartening to get the DMs through to us, which means we're already helping some people that we didn't know and they're getting something out of it. And that's really encouraging. Like, we did this to just help one. So if we can help, if there's more than that, that'd be fantastic. And if you know someone who's going through it, you know, blokes or girls or whatever, you've got friends who are going through something, hopefully you can share that. And even if they took 1 point out of one pod, that's good for us.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
next week,
Yep. Look, I'm not going to mention the topic we were discussing because I don't have the courage to actually do that topic next week. It's a bit of an inside joke, but you'll work it out, listeners, over the next few weeks. KM, I'm just going to put you on the spot here. KM he's a wizard. He's a chartered accountant, financial advisor, everything else. Not that that's advice. We will have the appropriate disclaimers sitting at the start of this podcast so that you don't draw any unnecessary conclusions about who we are. How would you feel about tackling some of the financial stuff?
I think we've got to touch on it for some of these blokes, like for certain. So we will definitely make it an episode, probably a couple of episodes. So that might be a breakup in the number. I
think we're going to have to break that segment up into a few because it's an important topic. It's not, it's not everything, obviously, but it's certainly an important topic. Guys' finances during this time are normally, put into an incinerator. So I think getting some good practical tips and tricks from you, things to consider, let's put it that way, things that they should at least look at considering during this time, I think would be very helpful for some of our listeners.
That's good. All right, JP, I think that's a wrap. So
that's a wrap, mate.
You have a great long weekend, and
I will.
we'll
you too.
See you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks,
You're
mate.
a champion. See you, buddy.